The porch groaned under the young veteran's boots, each step heavy with a war he hadn't left behind. He stood frozen, staring at the cabin's weathered door, his uniform crisp but his eyes distant, like they'd seen too much to ever come home. Inside. An older veteran waited, silver-haired, silent, carrying his own ghosts in a box he hadn't opened in decades. What neither knew yet was that a single letter, tucked in a forgotten flag, was about to unravel their shared silence and reveal a truth that would change them both forever. Welcome to Love Storytelling Channel. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If these stories speak to you, hit that subscribe button to support the channel and join us in honoring the values of duty, respect, and compassion. The porch creaked beneath his boots, but the young man didn't seem to notice. He stood there still in uniform, motionless, soaking in the familiar lines of the weathered old cabin. The wood smelled the same. The wind rolled the same down the hills behind it. But everything felt quieter. Not outside. Inside. He wasn't wounded. No medals missing. No limbs lost. But something in his step had changed. It wasn't limp. It was hesitation. Like every move had to go through 100 invisible filters before his body would allow it. He stared at the front door for a moment. It opened before he could knock. The old man stood there, silver-haired, clean-shaven like always, eyes sharp as they'd ever been. He didn't smile, didn't salute, just stepped aside, slow and deliberate, and nodded once. "Come on in, son." The young soldier stepped past him. No embrace, no handshake. Just the soft click of the door shutting behind them and 2 generations of war settling into the same silence. The living room hadn't changed. Same brown recliner, same faded American flag folded neatly in the glass case above the mantel, same scent of dust and coffee and pine wood that always made the house smell like fall. The old man motioned to the kitchen. "Dinner's hot," he said. "Didn't know what time you'd be in." The young man nodded but didn't move toward the table. He set his duffel bag down beside the couch, where a familiar dog lay sleeping older now, with more gray around the eyes. The dog lifted its head and gave a slow, tired tail wag. That was the first real welcome. They sat at the table. The plates were full, roast beef, potatoes, cornbread, the kind of meal you don't get overseas, but they didn't eat. Forks sat untouched, hands hovered above, eyes stayed down. Finally, the old man cleared his throat. "How long are you home?" The young soldier shrugged. "Undecided. You're not on orders?" "No, sir. They offered me a break." The old man nodded, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "They offered me one of those once. After my second tour." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was shared, familiar, like 2 men sitting on either end of a foxhole. The young man finally picked up his fork. "How long were you gone?" "Dead altogether." The old man's eyes stayed on his plate. 6 years. 3 deployments. 1 too many. Later that night, the young man walked outside onto the porch. The boards groaned again beneath his weight, but not like before. Now they seemed to recognize him. The stars were out, the same sky he'd stared at from the other side of the world, same constellations, same silence between them. His breath fogged the air as he leaned on the rail. Inside the house, he could hear his father's boots crossing the wood floor. Then the door opened. The old man stepped beside him, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. He handed one over, then leaned on the railing the same way, shoulder to shoulder but eyes forward. "You seeing anything out there?" he asked. "Sometimes," the young man answered quietly. "Not during the day. Night's the hardest," the old man said. They stood that way for a while. The wind moved through the trees like it had somewhere to be, The kind of wind you feel more in your bones than on your skin. The old man took a sip, then asked, "You sleeping?" The younger man didn't answer. The older one didn't need him to. He'd seen it in his son's eyes the moment he stepped onto the porch. That faraway stare, that invisible baggage, that flicker of something broken but still standing. He knew it because he'd lived it. It's not your body that's tired, son. It's your soul. The words sat in the cold air between them. And for a moment, the young soldier looked like he might break, but he didn't. He just tightened his jaw and nodded. The old man didn't say more. He didn't need to. He just placed his hand gently on his son's shoulder, a rare gesture for a man who'd lived most of his life speaking through silence. The coffee in both their hands was cooling now. But the moment, it was the first warm thing either of them had felt in a long time. The next morning, the young soldier woke early, not because he was rested. His body was trained to rise before the light came in. His mind, well, it never fully went to sleep anyway. He sat on the edge of the bed in his old room, staring at the floorboards. The posters were gone now. His old bookshelf covered in dust, but the creak in the floor near the closet was still there, just like it always had been. He stood up slowly, ran a hand over the back of his neck, and walked out into the hallway. Coffee was already brewing. His father was a silhouette in the kitchen window, broad shoulders, shirt tucked, sleeves rolled up. He was slicing something on the counter, quiet, methodical. The young man stood in the doorway and watched him for a few seconds before stepping in. "You still wake up before the sun," he said. "Some things stick," the old man replied. Not turning, they ate in silence again. This time, the young soldier tried a little harder, took bites, chewed, swallowed. But every fork scrape against the plate felt louder than it should have. Every sound felt like it echoed too far. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was thick, heavy, the kind of quiet that had layers. And underneath all of it was something unspoken. "I see you. I know. But I don't know how to say it either." After breakfast, the old man stepped out onto the porch with his coffee, and the young soldier stayed behind. That's when he noticed the box on the mantel. It was polished, dark mahogany, tucked just under the framed photo of a young man in uniform standing in a jungle somewhere far away. The eyes in the photo were different, clear, defiant, almost reckless, but the jawline, the ears, the posture, it was unmistakably his father. He walked to the box and leaned in. The folded American flag sat perfectly, each edge sharp, each line exact, and beneath the glass, at the bottom edge of the case, something caught his eye, a name tag, faded, burned a little at the corner, still legible. R. Callahan Kia, 1976. The young soldier swallowed. It wasn't his father's name. Not exactly. Same last name? Yes, but the first initial was different. He heard the screen door creak behind him. "You never asked about that," his father said. The young man turned. "I figured it was yours." He said, "I thought maybe you had it framed." His father shook his head, walked forward, looked at the flag. "No, that was my brother," he said quietly. "Uncle Ray. I told you he died in a car accident. That was a lie." The room stood still. The old man reached forward and touched the glass lightly with his fingertips. "We were in country together. Same unit. Even first time we'd seen each other in months. And it was like home followed me out there." The young soldier didn't interrupt. He took a hit, saving my fire team. Dragged two guys back under cover and caught a round to the throat. Didn't even get to say anything. He tapped the glass. "They gave me this at his funeral. Said he died a hero. I carried it in my pack every day after that." The young man stepped closer. "I never knew. No one did." The old man replied, "Your mom, your aunt. They knew he died, but not how. Not what he meant to me." Not what I carried. They stood there, side by side. The father's hand still resting on the glass, the son staring at the sharp corners of the triangle, the creases pressed so tightly it looked like it might still hold a breath inside. I thought if I kept it, the old man whispered, I could make peace with it someday. I thought maybe I could carry it for both of us, so no one else had to. The young soldier's voice was soft. Careful. You ever think it might have carried you instead? His father didn't answer. Not right away. But the way his jaw clenched, the flicker in his eyes said more than words ever could. That night, the rain came. Not hard. Just a gentle, steady sound on the roof. The kind of rain that fills the silence so no one has to. The young soldier sat by the window with the lights off. In his lap was a mug of tea. In his chest was everything he hadn't said. He watched as his father stepped out onto the porch, slow and steady, and stood there looking into the rain, just like he'd done every night for as long as he could remember. The young soldier got up, walked outside, and stood beside him. The rain hit them both. They didn't flinch. Do you still hear it? The younger man asked. His voice nearly drowned out by the rain. His father's face didn't change. All the time, he said. The younger man nodded. Then, how did you make it stop? A pause. The old man looked down at the railing beneath his hands. I didn't, he said. I just got used to the echo. Then, a beat later, but I wish I hadn't. They didn't speak again for a long time. Not because they were afraid, but because they were beginning to realize the silence between them had never really been empty. It was filled with things they'd both been too proud or too broken to say. And now, the quiet was starting to feel like something different, not a wall, but a bridge. The next morning broke in slow layers of gray. Clouds hung low, the kind that made everything feel quiet, even the birds stayed still. The young soldier stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring out the window over the sink. He had reheated last night's coffee but hadn't taken a sip. His father was nowhere in sight. He looked toward the porch, expecting to see the familiar figure in that same flannel shirt, arms crossed, watching the tree line. But the rocking chair was empty. Instead, a noise came from the old shed out back, the sound of wood shifting, hinges creaking, memories being disturbed. The young man set his mug down and stepped outside, the cool air biting his skin. He walked past the porch, past the tire tracks where he used to ride his bike, past the rusting metal pole that once held a punching bag. The shed door was open. Inside, his father was bent over a dusty trunk, one he hadn't opened in years. The young man stood in the doorway. "What are you looking for?" he asked quietly. The old man didn't turn around. Something I should have given away a long time ago. There was a pause. Then the older man reached into the trunk and pulled out a smaller wooden case, not unlike the one on the mantel, but this one had no glass, no brass engraving, just old wood, darkened by time, worn smooth by fingers and decades. He turned and handed it to his son. It was heavier than it looked. "Open it," he said. Inside was another folded flag, its fabric slightly more faded, the white not quite as bright, but it was just as sharply creased, just as perfectly preserved, and tucked inside the center fold was a photo, black and white, two young men in uniform, arms over shoulders, standing in a jungle clearing. One was unmistakably the old man, hair darker, face thinner, eyes wide open. The other man was taller, with a grin like he wasn't scared of anything. "Uncle Ray," the younger man asked. His father nodded. "We were kids. Thought we were invincible." He reached out and gently took the photo from the box, holding it between two fingers like it might tear just from memory. "He gave me that flag," the old man said, "back before his last patrol. Told me, if anything happens to me, don't let them bury me with it. I want you to keep it." The young soldier stared at the flag in the box. He knew his father exhaled through his nose, that half chuckle you make when you know something hurts too much to laugh at. We all knew, but we never said it. They walked back to the porch together. Side by side, the younger man carried the box like it was sacred. When they reached the steps, the father paused. "I brought this back from the war," he said. "I kept it in a footlocker, then a closet, then that shed." He looked at his son. "I thought I was protecting something, but really, I was just avoiding it." They sat. For a long moment, the box rested between them, unopened now but heavier than ever. The old man's voice was quiet. There were nights I sat right here, watching you sleep through that window. You were 9, maybe 10, and I thought, he's safe. He won't carry this." The younger man's eyes stayed down. "But I did," he whispered. The father nodded. "I know." Then came a moment the young soldier would remember for the rest of his life. His father picked up the box, turned it in his hands, then slowly placed it in his son's lap. "I don't want you to keep this," he said. "Not like I did." The younger man looked confused. "I don't understand." The old man's voice tightened, just slightly. "You don't have to carry what I carried, or what your uncle carried, or what you brought home in your own head." He placed a hand over the flag. This was never meant to be a burden. The younger man's jaw clenched. His eyes began to fill, but he didn't look away. For the first time since he'd come home, he let someone look straight into him. And the man looking back knew every shadow, because he'd walked through them too. The silence that followed wasn't painful anymore. It was sacred. Like a breath they both needed but never allowed themselves to take. Rain started again, soft and steady, but they didn't move. They sat under the overhang, watching it fall. Then, after a long time, the younger man spoke. "Why now?" he asked. "Why give this to me today?" The old man leaned back, rubbed his thumb along the curve of his mug. "Because you came home," he said. "Not just your body, but your eyes. The way you stand. You're not trying to be invincible anymore." He paused. "That's when the healing starts." The young man didn't respond, but he nodded, and with both hands, he lifted the flag from the box, held it gently in his lap, and stared at the photo one more time. Then he folded the flaps back into place, precise and tight, and shut the lid. His father watched without a word. The boy he'd raised was finally speaking the language he himself had never learned how to teach. And though neither of them would say it aloud, they both understood. This wasn't a ceremony. This was a release, from one soldier to another. The house was quiet that night, not silent like before, not hollow, just quiet. A kind of stillness that comes after something heavy has been lifted, not completely gone, but lighter. The young soldier sat on the floor of his childhood room, his back against the bed frame, the old flag box resting beside him. His hands moved slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of care. The box creaked faintly as he opened it again. He unfolded the flag. There, tucked within the layers, almost hidden inside one of the crisp, triangular folds, was something he hadn't noticed earlier. An envelope. Worn. Yellowed. The edges soft. The ink slightly smudged, like it had weathered more than one storm. His name wasn't on it. Just a single word written in block letters across the front, "Brother." He held the envelope for a moment, turned it over. Inside was a letter. One page, folded once, no signature on the back. The handwriting was rough, a little crooked, like it had been written quickly, maybe under fire. He unfolded it, his hands almost trembling, and began to read, to Ray. If you're reading this, then I guess I didn't make it. I always hated writing stuff like this. Makes it feel too real. But we both know the odds. You've always said war doesn't wait for permission. So here it is in case the noise gets louder than I do." The younger man paused, his eyes stinging. The letter wasn't meant for him. Not directly, but somehow. Every word cut into him like it was. He kept reading. "I know you. You'll carry this. You'll bury it. Smile at Mom. Tell people I went out doing my job. You'll nod and salute and bottle it all up because that's what we do. But if I go, don't do that. Please, don't carry me like weight. You already carry too much." The young soldier swallowed hard. The words felt like they were reaching across generations, bypassing logic, bypassing time, going straight to that place inside him that had stayed dark and locked. "You've always protected me. Even when you didn't say it. I knew. But if I fall, don't protect my memory. Live in spite of it. Tell your kids. Ray, let them know the whole story. Let them know we were scared too. That we weren't heroes, just boys trying not to die. That we cried sometimes. That we held on to things. That we were more than what they teach in books." A tear dropped onto the page, blurring one of the lines. He blinked, gently blotting it with his sleeve. "If you've got this, it means you lived, and that means the rest of your life is a debt you get to repay not in guilt, but in grace. You made it, brother. Don't waste it. And when you pass this flag on, don't pass the silence with it." There was no signature at the bottom, just a space, as if the final words had been swallowed by whatever came next. The young soldier leaned his head back against the bed frame, closed his eyes. The letter was still open in his hands, resting on his chest. And in the darkness of that room, something inside him broke quietly, not in pain, not in shame, but in release. He sat like that for a long time, just breathing, letting the words sink in, letting the weight shift from something pressing down to something pressing through. Later, he brought the letter out to the porch. His father was there, of course, like always, like every night before. But this time, there was a difference. This time, the younger man handed him the letter, didn't say a word. The old man stared at it for a long moment before taking it. He unfolded it slowly, like it might disappear if he moved too fast, and when he read it, when his eyes moved line by line, memory by memory, the steady hand of the soldier, the father, the man who had buried everything for decades, began to tremble. He didn't finish the letter right away. He folded it back, held it between both palms, and placed it gently in his lap. "I didn't know he wrote this," he said, barely above a whisper. "I think he meant it for both of us." The younger man replied. The old man nodded. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I've read thousands of words since the war, reports, orders, obituaries, but this was the first one that ever let me cry." The two men sat side by side, not as father and son, not as soldier and soldier, but as two human beings finally allowed to feel what they'd hidden from everyone else and from themselves. The wind picked up gently, rustling the trees, brushing the letter on the old man's knee, and for the first time in years, he let a single tear fall, not from grief, not from trauma, but from the beautiful, haunting truth that he had been loved and that love had survived a war. The next morning, the young soldier rose before the sun. He didn't need an alarm. His body had always been trained to rise early. But today, something else woke him. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that follows understanding. He stood in front of the mirror and looked at himself not in uniform, not in armor, just as he was. He hadn't looked at himself that way in a long time. Eyes swollen, hair messy, but the stare, it wasn't empty anymore. It was tired but awake. He dressed slowly. Not in a rush, not out of routine. He took the time to fold his shirt properly, to tighten his belt, not for formality, but for discipline. Not the kind the army taught him, but the kind his father showed him: internal discipline, quiet strength, unspoken dignity. Then he opened the case. The flag was still there, still folded tight, still holding the shape of everything it had been through. But today, he would carry it differently. The sky outside was still a soft gray when he stepped onto the porch. The sun hadn't fully broken yet, just a sliver of orange peeking over the treetops, painting gold onto the edge of the old rocking chair. His father was already there, waiting. This time. He didn't look up, just kept rocking. But the moment the young man stepped off the porch headed toward the hill behind the house, the old man stood and followed. They didn't speak as they walked. The grass was wet with dew. Their boots left a trail up the gentle incline, past the swing set that hadn't moved in years, past the place where the dog used to dig holes just for fun. At the top of the hill, the young soldier stopped. He turned to face the sunrise. The flag rested in his hands, cradled, not clutched, and the old man stood behind him, watching, waiting. The young man closed his eyes, took a breath. Then, slowly, deliberately, he unfolded the flag. For the first time, its full shape caught the wind, its colors soft in the dawn light, its edges trembling like something sacred had just been let loose. Then, without speaking, he knelt down and planted it not in the ground with a pole, not as a symbol of power, but as a gesture of surrender, of healing, of memory and release. Behind him, the old man exhaled. It wasn't just air, it was a lifetime. The two men stood side by side once again, shoulder to shoulder, as the sun broke over the hilltop. And for the first time since the boy had come home, there was no tension in his jaw, no weight on his shoulders, no faraway look in his eyes. Just peace. Fragile, but real. They sat on a fallen log nearby. Neither one of them needed to speak. The wind spoke for them. The light danced across the flag. The trees swayed like they'd been waiting for this moment too. Then, quietly, the young man said, "I used to think I had to be strong all the time. That if I cracked even once, it meant I didn't deserve to wear the uniform." His father looked ahead, then replied, "I used to think the same thing. For 50 years. A pause. Turns out, strength was letting someone see me bleed, and not looking away. The young man nodded. His voice cracked not from weakness, but from the truth finally surfacing. I thought coming home meant I had to be normal again, but I wasn't. I was angry, tired, numb. I thought if I told anyone, they'd think I couldn't handle it." His father turned, placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "That's what they made us believe. But you telling me, that's the first time I've felt whole in decades." Then, without warning, the young man stood. He picked up the flag, turned to his father, and placed it in his arms, not to return it, not as an obligation, but as an offering. "You kept it alive for me, Dad," he said, "but now I know. It was never meant to be carried alone." The old man didn't respond right away. His hands gripped the flag like he was touching his brother again, like he was holding every moment he'd ever buried. And for the first time in the young man's life, his father wept. Not quietly, but freely. As if every war, every silence, every sleepless night had finally been given permission to end. Later that evening, they sat together on the porch. The rocking chair creaked. The coffee was hot. The breeze moved through the pines, carrying with it not the sound of pain, but the echo of something softer. Forgiveness. They didn't talk about what happened that day. They didn't have to. It had already changed everything. One flag, one father, one son, and one moment. that finally broke the silence. This is the story of a father and a son, of a flag and a letter, of two veterans bound by wars they never spoke of until a single moment broke their silence. It's a reminder that in the quiet of a weathered cabin, where every creak of the porch and every fold of a flag carries a lifetime, sometimes the greatest way to honor the past is to let it breathe. So take a moment today. Think of Ray, of the young soldier, of the brother whose words crossed decades to heal. Share their story, not just to remember them, but to remind us all that healing is the truest form of strength. And if you're ever on a hillside at dawn, watch the flag catch the wind and listen. You might just hear the pulse of two hearts, finally at peace,